everyone. Welcome to my sanctum sanctorum in my office. And welcome to this yet another live stream video of another book, another series this time, a complete series. And this one is Courting Dragons in the King's Fool Mystery Series. So we are launching this new series about a court jester as a sleuth. So, who knew? So as you arrive, I see people, a couple people coming in. Hopefully there'll be more of you. I'm going to sort of natter on here for a little bit while people arrive. Just going to remind you again that when it's time to do a giveaway, you will go to jerrywesterson@gmail.com. And you'll say, I want to win that. And then my random number generator will pick one of you from that list of people that email me, and you'll win. And I'll let you know after the live event. So what do we got here? We are, it's a strange thing starting a new series for me for this one, because Crispin went on a long time. Went on for 15 books, and I was anxious to get to this one because I knew I wanted to write this one about Will Summers as the sleuth in Henry VIII's court. And for some reason, I had a very hard time getting started with all the research. I mean, I knew enough about the Tudor court to begin and taking notes and all that stuff before I really dove deep into the research. But I don't know, I was having such a hard time. Somebody helped me with a little bit of research to sort of get me kick-started, and then I was on my way. I guess I was Crispin blocked, I think. That's what happened. So once he was done, once that was in the can, I knew inside that I could start this new series. So it was going to kind of replace that in a big way. And there's another one that will help replace that, but we'll talk about that later. So, Will Summers. Let's talk a little bit about him. How did I know about him, and where did that come from? Well, for one, I did know about him because I was always a history nerd. So when I was about 10 years old, there was this show on PBS called The Six Wives of Henry VIII with Keith Michelle as Henry VIII. And it's by far still the only one that's accurately portrayed the Tudor era of the king. And and one of the characters was Will Summers. He kind of showed up a little bit. He didn't say much, but I was intrigued. And then when I was a little older, there was a book, a novel that was written in the 60s, and I knew that was about Will Summers. It's just a regular historical novel. And this is my teacup with kitties on it. And inside, you can see little fish bones. Cute. Anyway. So there was a novel about Will Summers that I thought was interesting. And so then I sat down and I was going to start researching. And what I found was that there's not very much about Will Summers. We know when he came to court, when he was probably about 20-ish. And that another master that he worked for prior to that introduced him to Henry. And that he stayed there basically the rest of his life. and a few other things. Um, there was a lot of plays about him. There's this book, dig it out here. It's somewhere else. Um, Written in the 17th century about him and some of his exploits. So you don't know if that's accurate. But there was enough. There was enough to go by in my own feelings about what I was going to write about, and mostly, I always look at the human side of the characters and try to fill them out anyway, because no matter what you know about a character, about people from that time period or any time period, is what people write about them, what letters they have written, and so you still have to fill it in based on all the whole, you know. So my feeling was, and looking at Will's person in paintings, because there are paintings of him, that he must have been a very special person, because he survived through all of Henry's wives, through the reigns of his three children, and retired at the age of Elizabeth. So they liked him. He wasn't just some juggler or some guy that came in and spouted off a few one-liners and toddled off in a shower of bells. There was something more to him, and that's why he lingered so long in the court and was favored, and where other people wrote about him. So, yeah, I thought that a person like that would be fun to write about. And that's the thing about writing historical mystery, is you're writing two books. You're writing a mystery, so there has to be clues, there has to be action, there has to be some fear and some terrible things going on. But when you're writing a historical mystery, you're also writing an historical novel. And so all the characters that are around them, or the characters that you're writing about, have to be true to what they were, with the latest of research, so that you know that you're getting it right, because you can't use a lot of older research, because new things are always coming to light. So when Will came to court as a young man, he left his family forever. He never went back. And so the court of Henry VIII became his family, and more intimately, Henry, his wife, and his children. So Henry stayed married to Catherine of Aragon for 24 years before the great matter of the divorce began. And often Will was part of the intimate family life that they had. And so when this began as sort of the happenings of this book, is when the great matter is beginning. Catherine is now estranged from Henry, and Aunt Boleyn is sneaking in, and Will is concerned because this is his family, and he doesn't want to lose them. So there are those intimate moments between he and Henry as well. So that's a wonderful thing. Oh, some people have arrived, and there are. Will Summers also plays an important role in Philippa Gregory. Well, let's not talk about Philippa Gregory. Oh, let's not talk about her. He was not a dwarf. And a very clever fellow to have navigated all those rivalries and sensitive egos. Yes, indeed. That really is amazing. Says Avis, he survived all those reigns. So obviously a man of infinite jest, and other things as well. But before we start getting into some of the history, let's talk about giveaways. Okay, so You will remember, of course. I'm going to slide off of screen here for a second. We have a few things to give away. There will be a giveaway for a Jester hat. See? One of those. A Jester rubber ducky. This very cool thing. This is a resin reproduction of a carving of a Jester. Medieval. And this guy here, of course, the t-shirt that has the little ditty that school children use to figure out who was what that Henry VIII married. So it's, some of you may know it from the play, the musical play Six, about Henry's 6 wives, but it's older than that. So, and one more thing, we have what is called a big belly. It's a little thing. For once, Henry loses his head. Oh, you can keep pins in it or a couple M&Ms. You know, it's a little jar. A little jarring. Okay. And when it's time to win those various, oh, you have to see my shirt. It's a tarot card of the Fool. So when those things come up, the giveaways, and they will come up throughout the hour and a half or however long we're going to be here, you will go to your email and write to jerrywesterson@gmail.com and say, I want to win the big belly, or I want to win the t-shirt, or I want to win when it's time. And then I will go later after this and I will do my random number generator and I will pick the name and you will have won and I will email you. So easy peasy. Okay, so there we are. I'm going to read you a little something. It's tea with lemon. A little something from Joseph Campbell. You remember him from many years ago? He reintroduced us to the hero's journey with all of his wonderful videos he did with Bill Moyers. And he wrote this about the trickster. Almost all non-literate mythology has a trickster hero of some kind, and there's a very special property in the trickster. He always breaks in just as the unconscious does to trip up the rational situation. He's both a fool and someone who's beyond the system. And the trickster represents all those possibilities of life that your mind hasn't decided it wants to deal with. The mind structures a lifestyle, and the fool or trickster represents another whole range of possibilities. So, writing about a trickster is fun. I tell you, when I was thinking of what the next series would be after the Crispin Guest series was done, you know, you have to think about a couple of things. First, what is going to be fun to write about? And the other thing is, what is going to be commercially viable? And the Tudors are always commercially viable. So I thought, well, let's do a Tudor book. And it's got to be a mystery. So why don't we do it? Why don't we write about Will Summers as the sleuth? So that's how that came about. And I want to remind you about this pandemic project of mine. I made this little Will Summers doll. Sort of just to keep as a mascot, and also for purposes of something like this to show you what somebody looked like when they were in their clothes of the Tudor era. So just push that back there. That's sort of his face. He's kind of a, if you look at the paintings of him, he's not that attractive a fellow, but he's okay. I mean, he's somebody you wouldn't look twice at, right? So he doesn't look crazy, and he's all right. He's all right, funny guy. But if you remember jesters, if you can picture in your mind European jesters, they're always wearing party colored clothing. That means one side is one color, one side's another, and then the hose stockings are the opposite colors. So that's party colored. Plus, there would be bells on their coats, on their hoods, and all those things. Now, take a look at some paintings. You can go to my website and look at the King's Fool page. Look at some of the paintings of Will Summers. He's not wearing those things. He doesn't look like a jester. Now, maybe he started out that way, wearing all the clothes and the bells and all that stuff, to set him apart so everybody knows who he is. So when he starts insulting people, you're not going to take out your sword and kill him. You're going to recognize, oh, that's the freaking jester. He's allowed to insult everybody and make a fool out of me. So that sucks. But for the king, it's very amusing. But so he started out that way probably. But if you look at the paintings of him, he's not wearing that stuff anymore. He's not apart from everybody else. He looks like a regular Joe of court. He looks like a servant. But he's not different from what everybody else is wearing. So I'm going to undress him here. So this is not for children, I guess. No, I got the grand idea of making this little mascot of him, and I thought, oh, I'm going to sew his clothes. I'm going to sew his clothes. So first, I tried taking some little patterns off the internet, and then I realized I can't do this. Fingers are too fat, and I can't do this. And then I thought, okay, well, I'm just gonna sew it to him, and that didn't work either. So what I ended up doing is painting his clothes on him. So you see, he's got the little chemise on there, and this is his. Excuse me, sir. Excuse me. I think I'll sort of take this off here. Here we go. This is his doublet. Okay, so look at the detail on his sleeve. He sort of painted the black work. That would be black embroidery that they had on their sleeve cuffs and many on the collars. So this is his doublet. And in these days in Henry's court now, they're wearing full hose with the little pant part, So in order to keep them up, you have these things called points, and they're tied to your doublet. So they're like suspenders or a belt, but they didn't have those yet. So you're basically tied into your clothes. And of course, he has the codpiece. It's where he keeps the fish. No, that's not where he keeps the fish. And that's not what's in there. It was obviously when you have to make water somewhere, it was easier to just untie that and go for it. So because very often he would probably be prattling around court just wearing this. This was not something that anybody else was wearing. They would be wearing those, those big fat gowns. Here's Henry. Get over here, Henry. Show us your big fat gown. So look at this. You got doublets underneath that. You got this over it. You've got another gown, like a coat over that. So there's a lot of bulk of the clothing itself. So, Henry in these early days was not a big fat guy. He was a good looking fella. So, but nobody's walking around like this but the fool, because he's got to tumble and do all those other things. And then his little coat was made by a friend of a friend. And she very graciously made the coat and the little jester hood that he's got. So that was very nice. And so Will is there, and he will come with me to various events. And have his clothes taken off. Poor fellow. So that's the beginning of that. And so jesters, who were the jesters? What were their lives like? What did they do? As an example, a fool named Roland Le Patour was given 30 acres of land by King Henry II of England when he retired, on condition that Roland return every Christmas Day to leap, whistle, and fart. Now that's a retirement. So European jesters were sometimes objects of ridicule, someone to laugh at, and some were mentally challenged people, dwarves or little people, but some were wits and challenged the monarch and the court to think, speaking truth to power. And that's the kind that Will is. So in this 17th to 18th century book about Will Sommers, the author described fools thus: some were fools by nature, such as we'll call mere naturals or idiots. Others by cunning and crafty fools, who, when they cannot thrive by their wisdom, seek to live by their folly. Now, the mentally challenged fools and jesters, they had them in Will's court too. Mary, who later became Queen Mary, Princess Mary, she had a fool named Jane Fool, and she was a mentally challenged woman. But they weren't so, it's interesting because they weren't so much making fun of them as really enjoying the humor that they expressed. Because those who were mentally challenged in those days were thought of as being guileless. They had no evil in their heart because they couldn't. And you know, that's what God gave them, made them simple, so they would just be innocents. And so it was a very interesting, different life that we tend to think of. But jesters have a long history. Now, ancient Rome, jesters were called balatrones, paid entertainers. Aztecs had jesters. A conquistador, Bernal Diaz de Castillo, wrote in his The Conquest of New Spain about the Aztecs. Sometimes some little humpbacked dwarfs would be present at his meals, the king's meals, whose bodies seemed almost to be broken in the middle. These were his jesters. There's a Hopi tradition of sacred clowns, and they're wearing kind of hats like this, and dark and white stripes painted on their bodies. But they are a combination of jester, priest, and shaman. And their little jokes and funny business were life lessons. They would teach you lessons while they fooled around and entertained you. Jesters were often employed to break bad news to the monarch. The Chinese enjoyed a cultural equivalent to the jesters, those who would do jokes and other entertainments. Jesters were usually, in the European sense, lowly people from lower households, which gave them a much different perspective on things that were going around at court and all the glorious, fabulous amounts of wealth around them, which Jester did not really share in, although he'd get tips and things all the time. You had to be very valuable, because there's a story about Will Sommers who was worried about a rival juggler. He was trying to horn in on his gig. And he so humiliated him in front of the whole court, that guy left forever. So it could be dog eat dog there in the world of jesters. So sometimes they were put in lavish surroundings. Sometimes, they were kept very well in their own rooms. And some were treated like servants. They had to just find anywhere to sleep like other servants did. And you didn't have to be the monarch. Was not the only one that had jesters. And if you're pretty rich, you could have your own fools. Cardinal Wolsey had his own fool, Patch, whom Will made friends with. So there was a lot of different people at court. Okay, so they made jokes. Obviously, they tumbled, offered riddles and rhymes, played instruments, imitated others at court, performed puppet shows, juggled, all around entertainers. They stuck close to the monarch or their masters and were allowed to mock them publicly. So Will was allowed to call the king Hal or Harry and uncle, things like little intimate things like that, to show that he was that close to the king. So that's sort of the life of your European jesters. But just to give you an idea, the golden age of European jesters covered some 500 years, beginning in the 12th century, of what we would know, or what we would call a court jester. Though the Vikings also had these sort of trickster fools, fellows as well. Scholars have identified 68 individual fools in the courts of Spain, 57 in France, 45 in England, not counting Ireland and Scotland, 23 in Italy, 19 in Germany, and even a few in Iceland. What about you, Norway and Sweden? Was nothing funny there? China, by contrast, had 2,000-year-old jester tradition that began somewhere in between 770 and 476 BCE. Long time. The end of the tradition, at least in England, after the Restoration in the 1600s, Charles II of England did not reinstate the tradition of the court jester because, remember, this is after Oliver Cromwell, the Protector, there had been a civil war. And Oliver Cromwell, there was going to be no music, no dancing, no theater, no Christmas. And when he was finally gotten rid of, his son, Charles II, he came back to the monarchy, and he was the fun king. He brought theater, and at this point, women could be actresses now, and theater and music and gaiety and life was good again in England. So they really didn't need a jester. But one of his favorite comedians, like there is a tradition, even in Shakespeare's day, of a particular actor being the one that's the comedian. He would be playing Bottom in A Midsummer Night's Dream, for instance. So, but in Charles II's day, it was Thomas Killigrew. He was his favorite, but not a jester, but an actor that probably hung around court. Samuel Pepys, in his famous diary, called Killigrew the king's fool and jester, with the power to mock and revile even the most prominent without penalty. But that was really the end of that tradition, which in a way was kind of sad because it did give the outsider a job, which they need in court. But I think it's time we start giving things away. Let's give things away. So let us start with this thing. It's got a lot of heft to it. This thing that's got a little hook. You can hang it on the wall. And it looks like the carved wood of what this would have been, probably in a church somewhere, way up high. So that's a jester, an entertainer. He's a jester, not just an entertainer, by his hood. It looks like long ears. That's a jester's hood. Kind of cool. So right now, go to your phones, go to your email, and go to jerrywesterson@gmail.com and say, I want the carving of the jester carving. That. I want that thing right there. So do that. I'll check on later. Check back at you later. Okay, I'm just checking here to see if you guys have any questions in your little chat box here. I'm looking for questions that you have that come to your head. Yes, the codpiece, not for fish. No fish indeed. You thought most court jesters were dwarves. No, it's not a dwarf. And most of them were not dwarfs. There were plenty who were not. Because you're getting your information from Phil McGregory. That's what I'm saying. How did he discover his calling? He was when he worked for a wool merchant who was the staple in Calais, but he's originally from Shropshire, so that he got a job doing what we don't know. Was he just another guy trying to be in the wool trade? And he was, there's always some guy or gal at work who is funny, who just cracks you up all the time, and I don't know anybody like that. But just funny all the time. And the wool staple, King Henry was coming through, and maybe he just said, I'm going to get rid of this guy. He's causing these other workers to not do their work. Or he just wanted to get in favor because he just thought Will was damned funny. So he introduced him to Henry. He said, here, would you like a jester? I got one hot off the shelf. And Henry said, yeah, I like this guy. He's funny. So we took him with him back home to England. And that's as much as we know, because we don't know much. But yeah, and he could sing. So I have him doing more singing, possibly more than he ever did. But there's that. So yeah, that's the only question so far. Ask those questions, people. That's what keeps the network flowing here. But so what else have we got to talk about? I'm so glad I got to really delve into the Tudor period. I mean, like I said, I knew more than a passing information about the period. I knew quite a bit, but there's all the details, and then there's all the other people at court that I kind of knew but didn't quite know where they fit into it. And boy, when you dive deep, it was a viper pit. Let me tell you, people are edging other people out of the way, and they don't care if they get executed for things. So I mean, everybody's trying to elbow their way into position. And when the whole great matter of the king beginning his divorce proceedings against Catherine of Aragon, now Henry wasn't the original heir to the throne. He wouldn't have been king. His older brother Arthur was going to be king. He was the one he was getting, Henry was the spare. Another Harry, that's the spare. But so he had time to do other pursuits, but he was a kid at the time. And his older brother wasn't much older than him. He was about 16 when he died. But he was younger than 16 when he was betrothed to Catherine, who was also like 14. So they both weren't going to be allowed to marry because they were just too young. So, but they got betrothed, which is as good as married, but with all the papers signed and the treaty and the money, the dowry coming to England to Henry VII was sort of miserly. So he liked this money coming toward him. So she marries Arthur. She gets married to Arthur, but he dies not very long after they got married. So here was poor Catherine. She was stuck, kind of stuck at court because they didn't want her back in Spain. That was Queen Isabella and King Ferdinand, by the way, the same ones that sent Columbus out to sea to sail the ocean blue. Those were her parents. And they didn't want to break the treaty. They didn't want her back. They didn't want a used princess back. She was going to be Queen of England. And of course, King Henry VII, Henry VIII's father, didn't want to send her back because he'd have to send the dowry back. And, he was spending that money. He didn't want to send it back. So Henry VII was saying, okay, well, Henry, when you get old enough, now that you're going to be king, you can marry her. And Henry said, no, I don't want to marry her. She's used goods. I'm marrying somebody else. No, she's older than me. No. But once Henry VII died, and Henry can make his own decisions, he said, he looked at the books and looked at the dowry that was in there and said, oh, I think I should marry this woman. And they had to get a papal dispensation to do so because she was married to his brother. And that was a no-no. It's kind of incesty. So he got the dispensation from the Pope, and Catherine swore that the marriage was not consummated. So that was okay. So Henry married her. And it was a happy court. Everybody said so. It was a very happy court. It was a festival every day. I think it was Erasmus who said that. I'm not sure who said that. But how it was a good court. Catherine had bore a living child, a boy, who died very soon after he was born. Other miscarriages, other stillbirths, and then there was Mary. And after her, I think there was a couple other miscarriages, but that was it. So he had Mary. But Henry was okay with that. And that Mary was his pearl of the world. And he loved her. And they still had a nice little family life. Until he really started to worry about having a son to leave after him. And because when you have a princess, and if she becomes queen, because this was not normal. This only happened once before, the Empress Matilda, way back in the 1100s. And there were problems with that. There was a civil war to fight for the throne, and she lost. So this was not something that they knew how to do in England, have a queen. And the problem was that she would have to marry, of course, but the husband was the head of the household. So how does that work if the woman is the queen, but she's got a husband who wants to be the head of the household, and she wants to rule one way, and he wants to rule another? That becomes a problem. So he really would rather have a son, and he started to hear from his advisors that he doesn't have a son, a legitimate one, that is, because he had a couple of illegitimate sons. He doesn't have that because he married his brother's wife. So that became bigger and bigger in his mind, and it was let's talk about sin for a minute. It was a big sin for him to marry his brother's wife, even with the Pope's dispensation. I mean, rules and regulations were thrown left and right out the window and into the window and splattering against the window. And so it was decided, that he was going to get a divorce so that he can marry somebody else and get legal sons. And I was going to say a word about sin. So he's worried that God's punishing him for his sin of marrying his brother's wife. Meanwhile, he's breaking 10 commandments left and right by committing adultery all over the place. That doesn't seem to come into play, though, does it? In the realm of sin. So, but this is how the medieval mind could make it all work, just like it works today. So, anyway, so so that was the whole deal of him looking for another wife. And Anne Boleyn was there. She had trained in the French court, how to behave in court, how to be a courtier, and all the little coquettish ways that a woman could win. So Anne Boleyn was she was engaged a couple of times to other courtiers, but when her sister was having her affair with Henry VIII, and she got pregnant, she saw how Henry kind of ignored her and pushed her back, and that was kind of it for them. And so she learned that if she gave in to Henry while he was still married to Catherine, that it was not going to work. But they played this little game, this very courteous, courtly love game, letters back and forth, and spending time with each other, and all that. But she wouldn't give it up. She was going for the grand prize of wife and queen. But that's for the second book. So each book will be about a wife. So we'll look at some questions here before we give something else away. Let's see. Were there things you discovered in research that surprised you and made you say, oh, wow, I need to find a way to insert this in the book? Always. There's always something. Always something. Just little things sometimes. Little things in passing that I mention that, I had pages of research about. Pages. And then it becomes one line, one little sentence in the book. But it's, it was interesting. What you want is you don't want to info dump. You don't want to just dump all kinds of information. Look what I researched. Wasn't this interesting? You don't get to do that. An effective historical novel lets that stuff trickle out as the book goes on. This little, the mores of the time, the religious attitudes, what was a classy thing to do and what was a classless thing to do. All these things come out in dialogue and what a character observes about someone else, maybe some gossip, But that's, that stuff is the stuff that rolls out slowly. So you're not inundated with information right away. Because a lot of people, well, the problem with research is a lot of people get their history from books and TV and films. And sometimes they get them from books that are written by novelists who really aren't the best historically accurate authors. And there are quite a few out there, and some of them write Tudor books. And it's very frustrating for the rest of us, especially people who have loved TV shows like The Tudors. That's not history, folks. So I really work hard to try to get all the history stuff right so that I can hang the rest of my fiction on top of that. So you believe everything. If you believe the history I'm presenting to you, then you will believe the fiction that I'm sneaking in on the edges, So that's an important aspect of writing historically. It's hard. It ain't easy. Sometimes authors, I guess, they go the easy route and they tell tales that have no foundation in truth. So that's where we are. Well, let's see. I thought Henry VIII had a crush on his brother's wife and wanted to marry Catherine. He might have, but he was a kid. So that was all interesting. But once it started to be a thing that his father was trying to force on him, no, he didn't want to marry her. That was it. He did not want to marry her. But changed his mind because he learned things. And that's why we don't talk about certain authors. Yes. But, she's so much bigger bestseller than I am that I don't worry about the occasional swear. So anyway, when people have a certain idea of what they think that historical time period is, and then they read a book like mine that is as historically accurate as I can get it, then they start thinking, well, this can't be right. Because I read that in another book, or I saw that in the TV show, and it's not the same here. So what they think they know is not true, and because I researched it. I actually went through lots of books and read them and experienced them. I think it's time to give another thing away. Let's give away this little big belly. Big belly. Get in my belly. I guess there's a whole series of these where they sort of take a character and squish it down to this thing. Because there's, I think, an Elizabeth I one, and maybe there's some other ones. It's a little series. Because there's not really much room for anything. You can put a thimble in there. It's a very small. Just have it on your desk. And Henry Revenge. Henry Revenge. Take his head off. Anyway, you go now to your phones and your laptops, and you can't get it. And you go to jerrywesterson@gmail.com, and you tell me you want the Henry Big Belly. Henry Big Belly. Nobody wants a Henry Big Belly, but you want that, because that will be fun. So, so yes, then it got to be fun, the research, because before I was stressing about, where do I begin? I can't even imagine where to begin, and where, and everybody knows Hampton Court, right? But the first two books, they're not at Hampton Court. Hampton Court was Wolsey's, Cardinal Wolsey's, Thomas Wolsey, was building this big, because, he belongs to the church and with a vow of poverty and chastity. So he had his mistresses in town. So he was building this fantastic palace for himself. And he started to get in trouble with Henry because he couldn't get the divorce from Rome, where he sent him time and again, and it wasn't working. And so eventually he was going to have Wolsey arrested and probably executed. But Wolsey said, here, I'm finishing up this house. It's not yet finished, but you can have it. He gave that palace to Henry, and you can't even imagine how much it was worth in those days. I mean, the equivalent would be millions upon millions of dollars or pounds. And he gave it to him, but it was all to no good. I mean, Wolsey died before he could really go to prison. So, Henry's like, I got the key. It's mine. Let's get it finished so I can move in. So, there are many palaces, many. And I get to research them. The problem is the other ones, the ones where he was born, the Palace of Placentia in Greenwich, isn't there anymore. It's Greenwich. It's the Royal Naval College, and where Greenwich Mean Time is, or where the longitude is. So that's not there. So you have to rely on as many plans and drawings of it from contemporary settings as you can. So you have to research all of those little things like that it's not a little thing. You got to know what it looks like because Will is going to be running around all over the place. And so I have to know what sort of corridors he's running down and what sort of places he has to go to get to Henry, because his first responsibility is to Henry and to find out if he needs entertaining. So even though he has his own room, he has to go do that. So let's see. Did you physically visit the setting of the book? Well, no, because it doesn't exist. And that was the same problem with the Crispin Guest series. All that stuff in London isn't there anymore. Newgate wasn't there. The city walls are gone. There's no city walls anymore in London. And a lot of the medieval stuff burned down in the last Great Fire in 1666. So hardly nothing's there. Even Westminster and St. Paul's didn't look the same in Crispin's day. Christopher Wren, that created the whole dome in St. Paul's and all that, that was much later. So there was nothing is there. Now, I've been to London. I have been to Hampton Court 40 years ago. That was the last time I was in England. And I don't know if I'll ever get back. I would love to. I'd love to go back to England and see all those things. But it was nice to go and see those things up close, smell the smells, touch the granite of the cathedral walls. I was most touched when I went to Canterbury. And they were refurbishing a lot of it. They were getting ready to open the Mews down below. That used to be where Thomas Becket was entombed. But when he became this very profitable pilgrimage point, they moved him upstairs and made a nicer tomb for him and a whole thing there. And you can read about that in Troubled Bones in the Crispin Guest Medieval Noir series. But so Canterbury was cool. They were doing a lot of, like I said, reconstruction, a lot of new stonework masons are working on. So happened to sneak down into the Mews and, far from the madding crowd. And it was really, that was the thing that sort of clicked in my head. I was 17 or 18 at the time. And it was cold. It was dank. You could smell the wet granite of the walls. And it was dark. And all you could see in the darkness were the vaulted ceiling down there, but it was holding up the rest of the church. All the vaulting there, which is quite why they call things a vault when you put them a tomb or something down below of a church or something. And it just like clicked, like, ooh, this is old. This is really old. And all of these things happened all those years ago. I mean, the weight of history on top of us. It was amazing. It was an amazing moment, and I do wish I could go, but I haven't found a bag of money yet, so I can't do that. So I look at lots of pictures and read a lot about it and descriptions from the people of the time period, and that's how you got to do it. Sometimes, I mean, if you're writing about ancient Troy, that doesn't exist anymore. In fact, they didn't even think it was real for centuries. They just thought it was part of the mythology of the Trojan horse. Remember that? So, but then in I think it was the 1800s, they discovered Troy, and so maybe that Trojan horse was real. That would be cool. So you just got to do your best. You got to work out what you've read and what other people talk about it, and then you create that world. And that's what you want people to do for movies and TV shows, but they don't always do it. The hair. When the hair is wrong, it just throws me out of the story. And costumes. The Tudors! Stop it! Why did you do that? Anyway, I know why they did it. They did it for money. So, what else are we going to give away? How long does it take to write a book, including revisions and final editing? Well, because this is a mystery and the publisher expects a book to be published every year, you've got to write it faster than you normally would if you're just writing an historical fiction novel. Because you can take a couple of years to do those. But you can't do it for, I can't do it. A middle-list author, I can't do it. If I were an incredibly best-selling author, I could take all the time I want. But no, you got to get it out there because it's a commercial world and you got to sell them books. So I ask that the publisher give me 9 months to write the book. And that includes, I include anyway, about 3 months of just research and trying to figure out. Because as you research, you find out things. Little things pop out at you and you think, oh, I could use this as a plot point. But maybe not in this book. Maybe the next book or the next book. So you write all that stuff down. I take lots of notes. And in fact, for the Tudor books, I have 2 spiral-bound notebooks full of notes and research and all that good stuff. Look at all these tabs on here. It's crazy. But it helps me find slang. I've got all the characters. I've got where everything is in court and who's allowed to be there when they're eating and all that good stuff. So tons of stuff, little bits and pieces of things. And that's the fun part. And it's also the important part because it's telling you little bits that you can use to make it more real, but also it will help you with the plot because there's still a mystery. Because even though there are real things happening around it, the mystery can't interfere with the history. I can't make somebody murdered who was not, But if they happen to die, you could sort of maybe use that a little bit in a different way. So we're always using the real stuff first, and that gives the reader a sense of reality of what they're getting in their fiction. Like I said, it's hard when it's a TV show or a film or a popular book or even a popular nonfiction book that's a bestseller. I never trust those for research. They're never very good because they're light entertainment. And that's good in a way because it does get a lot of people interested and then they delve deeper. But in a bad way, it gets people interested and they believe everything they're reading in that one book that has one angle and one agenda. So just be careful. How did I find my first agent? Oh, we're going to talk about that stuff. We can do that. How did I find my first agent, and do you still have the same one, and have you had more than one publisher? Okay. I got my first agent, and it took me 3 years to get her, and we worked for 3 years, and she did land one book, but the publishing house went out of business. Which is kind of a good thing because now, looking back, if that book had been published then, that wouldn't have been good for my reputation, I don't think. It's just, it was well-researched, sort of, but the writing wasn't quite there yet, to say that. So we looked at each other after 3 years, and we said, yeah, I don't think we can do anything for each other at this point. And so we left amicably. And then my second agent was in New York when 9/11 happened. And she wasn't killed, but she was just never the same. And so she kind of wandered out of the industry. So my third agent, and these are years, apart, and lots of different books. I wrote a book a year, no matter what I was doing. I just kept writing and writing and writing, and seeing if one of them, would get the attention of an agent. So the third one, I discovered that she wasn't. She wouldn't let you communicate with her. You had to go through secretaries and stuff. That's a big red flag. And I found out later that she wasn't keeping books well for her clients. So I fired her. And finally, my fourth agent. Well, before that, I was chatting with my first agent, who I was still friendly with, and she says, this writing historical fiction. I was just writing historical fiction. And the kind of stuff I like to write were characters, ordinary people, in extraordinary circumstances, and not necessarily the court. Sort of like Oswald the Thief. Okay, if you read that or want to read it, read it. It's a cute book. Here it is, right here. Oswald the Thief. It's a medieval caper. So it's Ocean's 11 in the Middle Ages. But when those were submitted to editors, editors didn't know what to do with them because they weren't part of their normal things that they could market and sell. So they just rejected them. So this first agent of mine said, why don't you write, how about a mystery, a medieval mystery? Because mysteries, it's a great market. There's always mysteries on the bestseller list. There are publishers who just publish mysteries. There are bookstores that just sell mysteries. They have fan conventions. They have all these conferences. Try writing a mystery. I said, oh, geez, I don't write a mystery. That's a whole other set of complication, But then I thought, well, more rejections. I think I will learn to write a mystery. And so that's when Crispin Guest was born. And that, so that was a long time of writing different books. Finally getting an agent, my fourth. And it took a couple of years to figure out writing a mystery and this medieval one. So I found an agent, and that's the book. I think I finally got sold after 14 years of trying. So that was with the big New York publisher, St. Martin's. And do I have more than one publisher? Yes. First 6 books were published by St. Martin's, Crispin Guest series, and they didn't want to publish anymore. I wanted to write more. So I self-published the first original book that couldn't get sold, Cup of Blood. I rewrote it, had it edited, and I self-published. That was my first self-publishing outing. And I got it reviewed by Publishers Weekly and Booklist and Library Journal. It got 2 award nominations. And because I wanted a book out before the next publisher could pick up the series. And then Severin House, a UK publisher, picked up the rest of the Crispin Guest series. And I wrote new books for them until I was done at 15. In the meantime, I also wrote an LGBTQ mystery series, Contemporary, the Schuyler Fox Mysteries, under the name Haley Walsh. And that was with MLR Press, a small publisher of gay romance. So I got that published until I started to self-publish those. And good thing, because now they're out of business. So that's, I've had other publishers for anthologies I've been invited to write for. But so that's kind of it. The two main ones has been St. Martin's and Severin House. And if another one comes along for something else, that would be great. I will do that too. Oswald the Thief was a lot of fun. Yes, it was. And it was really hard to write because that's a caper. So how do you write a caper book in the Middle Ages when you don't have the technology that they have on Ocean's 11 with, communication devices and all this? So that was fun. And there will be another one of Oswald the Gambler, and that will be in 2024 whenever I can get a chance to sit down and write it. This new series, which this is with Severn House, and they are part of Canongate. So Severn House's logo there in the UK, Edinburgh, I think. It's got to be time to give away something else. This is what we'll do. We'll do the T-shirt now. This is 100% cotton. It's extra large, men's extra large. Should fit most of us. So go to your email. Ask for the T-shirt. SherryWesterson@gmail.com. Yeah, T-shirt's fun. Craig was the first one to get the T-shirt, and so he got his. Did Severn House publish the Enchanted Chronicles? Nope, the Enchanted Chronicles were self-published. My agent tried to sell the first one, and again, people just didn't know what to do with it. It was Gaslamp, steampunk fantasy, a Jewish Romani character as a magician, and they just didn't know what to do with it. It was one of my favorite little series. It's 3 books, and I still might write a sequel to it. But it was a lot of fun, and it's what got me interested in the second series I'll be writing. Oh boy, here we go. Isolated Seance is part of an irregular detective mystery series, and that is my Sherlockian series. That is a Sherlock Holmes pastiche, which is in the style of and with the characters of a particular thing. So Sherlock Holmes, my character Tim Badger was, when he was a child, a Baker Street irregular. Holmes had hired these street kids to spy for him, to do all the little things he couldn't do because he'd be noticed. So Tim Badger grew up, and now he thinks he's good enough to open up his own private detective agency. And with his friend Ben Watson, who's had a whole bunch of different kinds of jobs that sort of help him qualify to be a detective, they work together and they solve crimes in late Victorian London. And occasionally Holmes is there to help them out and to offer bits of advice, whether wanted or not. So it's fun, it's humorous, there's all kinds of good things that happen in it. And I get to write Sherlock Holmes, his voice. So that's cool. So yeah, that's the other series that I'm writing. That's coming out in June. So we will be doing another one of these in June. So hopefully wherever you are, if you're on vacation or whatever, you can come join us. That would be fun. Yeah, a couple of these things. There's another publisher. I forgot about the Book of the Hidden series. That's another paranormal urban fantasy series that I wrote, 4 books. And that started with, it's called Diversion Books. And after the first 2, we were getting ready to sell them on the last 2. And they had switched over to writing sports nonfiction books. So because I had those 2 already written, ready to go, my agent and we self-published it. Didn't do as well as I had hoped it had, but it's really hard to break into a different genre that's not mystery and that's paranormal. And so that was the problem with the the Enchanter Chronicles, Demon Device, Clockwork Gypsy, and Library of the Damned, my favorite titles of all time. How many books will be in the Sherlockian series? I don't know. Let's hope there'll be a lot of them. I hope so. I plan on writing a lot of them. The Will Summers series will be 6 books. I decided that's smaller, shorter than 15 books is a better way to go, because then I'm easily able to explore different new things to write. And with 3, because with Oswald, 3 series a year, that's enough. 2 really is enough for a year. So anyway, your husband collects Sherlockian pastiches. Well, then this will be right up his alley. Yes, Avis, I enjoyed the urban fantasy books too. I don't know how many other people did. They still sell. I'm still middleist, as they call it. So that's how that goes. We are into our next hour here, and I'm going to cut us off pretty quick. But we've got to give away. Where did my ducky go? Oh, there it is. He's under Will. He's under Will Summers. We have these to give away. We have one Jester hat and 1 Jester ducky. So you can put those both in your email. You'll get one or the other. So 2 chances to win. So go ahead and put that in there. Are there any other questions? Keep them coming here. I'm trying to catch them as I go through here. How many hours per day do I write? It has changed a lot. When I started out writing, 92 for publication. My son was a toddler, and I couldn't write all day like I wanted to. But as he got older, I could write all day. I can't do that now. I'll be 63 this year. I can't. My attention span doesn't do it. So I'm lucky now. I mean, I used to be a minimum of 10 pages a day. Now it's minimum 5 pages a day. And I'm still lucky to do that. Sometimes I go well beyond the 5 pages. Just keep on going. Keep on typing. But no, I'm always having to stop and research things. But mostly it's like, I just can't concentrate anymore. So, but I get them done. They're not giant tomes of anything, but I get them done. So I don't know if there's any other questions to go. We're going to wrap this baby up pretty quick. I don't really have enough voice for reading, but I'll be posting in my YouTube channel my event I did at Book Carnival in Orange. They videotaped the whole thing, including the reading. So when I put that up, I haven't put it up yet because I wanted to do this. When I put that up, you can go ahead and see and watch the whole thing. It'd be just like being there. and I would be reading a little sample. Good old Courting Dragons. Now the second one is called The Lioness Stumbles. And I don't know when that's coming out, but it better come out next year. That's the only thing. Sometimes they publish 2 in a year. It drives me nuts. It's a lot of launching I have to do. Lots of launch. So, anything else? No one wants to read War and Peace. No, they don't. Not anymore, they don't. I remember when I loved it. I used to read those things, but nobody has the attention span anymore. I don't. There's too many things competing for your time. Facebook and TikTok and all those other things. I'm on TikTok too, by the way. So if you're on TikTok, please like all of my. I have some videos up there. I have the book trailer that goes with this series. It's fabulous. It's over 10,000 views. So, but it needs some likes. And the Oswald the Thief one, everybody loved that one. That got a lot of likes. So go on there and click like on those things. Do I have my own indie editor? I don't. I've used copy editors, but I don't use content editors. It's just not financially feasible. Once you put out for formatting and for cover design and all these other things, I think it's pretty good on its own, and the copy editing is the most important because that's when you make all the dumb typos and such. So those guys, I do hire those guys. Who puts together your trailers? Well, I'm glad you asked. That's my husband and me. And once he's retired in about a year, he plans on offering his services to those who may wish to have book trailers of their own. So that will be something that we will be working on together as time goes on. So enjoy your books. They really are a delight. Thank you. I enjoy them too. I mean, if I didn't like them, you're not going to like them. But so it's always good to like what you're writing. I think I've covered just about everything I've seen here. I think. I'm looking. I really like Will Summers in this. In the portion that I've read, the reading that I did, is about when Will and Henry makes Will go on a hunt with him. Mostly just so they can be alone and talk about various things. And it's those moments that I really like because it sort of rehabilitates Henry a little bit. I mean, let's face it, Henry made some bad choices, selfish choices, and hurt a lot of people. Not just executing them that didn't deserve it, but a lot of his children, everybody. But in terms of violence, he wasn't worse than other medieval kings. But we just remember him because of the wives and the executed wives, and the number of them, 6 wives. And so I'm trying to show the human side of Henry that Will sees, because Will loves him. He was brought into his family, and now he feels like if he can only just help Henry the right way, then all will be well. He could have his old Henry back. And so it's very touching. And when you think about that, it really touches me. It gives me the old palpitations there. So yeah, he's fun to write. And I look forward to the next ones. And I look forward to your reading them and reviewing them and giving them lots of stars, because they need lots of stars, my little books. So, okay, so you know what to do. You're emailing to get prizes. I'm going to go through them now and see who wins what. But you won't find out until I tell you later on Facebook, or if you get that email from me saying you won. So, thank you very much for coming. I hope this was amusing and helpful and informative and all that good stuff that we like to do here. And Gather Henry spent most of his last years in pain due to lance injury. No, it wasn't a lance injury. Well, yeah, he did injure his leg, and it was ulcerated and never healed. So yeah, he was in pain a lot, and he couldn't exercise and do the things he loved to do. He couldn't ride and wrestle, and so the only thing he can do is eat. And he got fat. So that's what happened to that. So anyway, as you know, this is recorded. And so once we're finished here, if you missed any of it, you can watch the parts you missed. So you can be all up to snuff. Because when we have our exams, you're going to have to answer questions. So Anyway, I'm glad you came. Thank you for coming, and good luck on winning some of that stuff. We'll find out right now. So thank you very much, all. Thank you. Thanks for coming. Bye.